高橋よいチャンネル。
So, South Korea is applying for TPP membership.
I can't help but to wonder about which country South Korea is answerable to. It seems obvious since South Korea is trying to join the TPP along with China. Until recently, South Korea hasn't mentioned anything the TPP. There are many ways to think about international agreements and trade. For reference, let me define the two words, bilateral and multilateral. Bilateral is an agreement between two countries, whereas multilateral is an agreement between multiple countries. When there is to be an agreement, there are two options to choose from, depending on the situation. TPP is an example of a multilateral agreement. There are pros and cons to both types of agreements. When multilateral agreements are working smoothly, there are fruitful outcomes, but it takes time because such agreements are between multiple countries. It's hard to convince diverse groups of people to come to an agreement. Bilateral agreements are only between two countries, so the process is less complex and the issues are narrower, so the process moves along more quickly. Choosing the type of agreement one is hoping for is part of the strategy. Traditionally, South Korea tends to choose bilateral agreements. They have concluded bilateral agreements with many countries. With multilateral agreements, their voice isn't very influential, and they may not be heard. On the other hand, Japan tends to choose multilateral agreements, but Japan does not like to compete against South Korea. Whenever the topic of TPP comes up, the idea is rejected because the Koreans say they only do bilateral agreements. Now, however, because China suddenly wants to join, the Koreans are confused. They are wondering what's going on. President Moon Jae-in follows China, so they must join. This is completely different from their past behavior, so maybe China has told them something like, "You better come and join us." However, they are doing the exact opposite thing they have proclaimed. I wonder what they're thinking. It seems like they don't have any principles.
It doesn't seem like China's bid is going to be successful, but does South Korea acknowledge this?
I think they are aware of the situation. Since countries applied in a chronological order, the UK will be the first to join. If the UK is accepted, it will be impossible for China to be accepted. There's the UK and Australia, so even if Japan doesn't do anything, there's no room for China. Also, the TPP agreement is based on capital liberalization, which means that China would have to liberalize their markets, which is impossible under the CCP control. Liberalizing investment markets would mean that within China, foreign corporations could be established, and this would be against the Chinese policy stating that all corporations and lands belong to the government. Unless the CCP is defeated, which may be impossible, China will not be allowed to join. This isn't only about the other concerned members like the UK and Australia, but after China comes Taiwan, and then South Korea. That means that it would take forever for South Korea's turn. The Koreans think they might not have to deal with this question for a while.
What will happen if China is rejected and South Korea is accepted?
The process is in order, so I think South Korea will want to wait a moment, because they think that China has to join first. It's possible to let Taiwan join first, but that'll make it even harder for China. One interesting idea would be to let the UK join first and then Taiwan. Then ask China if they still want to join.
Will China say then we will not be joining?
It's not like they will never join. To be honest, Xi Jinping hasn't really thought this TPP deal through carefully. There aren't many benefits in joining. I think that maybe Xi didn't really understand what joining the TPP would actually mean. The same goes for South Korea.
So after all, South Korea is joining because the boss said so.
maybe Korea was in a situation where they had to say yes. This strategy is very tricky and interesting for the other members to watch. First, the UK is accepted, and this is already a disadvantage for China. Then China and Taiwan applied within a week of each other, so if they say Taiwan was first and they let Taiwan join first, there's going to be some drama. Of course, Taiwan wants to join. They were even invited to the Democracy Summit by the Western countries. It would be very interesting if China were told that the procedure is taking too long and then Taiwan is accepted.
Are any other countries cautious about Taiwan?
Well, some countries are, but if countries like Japan, Australia and the UK say okay, then it's all right. If the main members welcome Taiwan, then everyone else won't object. Taiwan is a democratic country and they comply with the necessary requirements, so their acceptance will be easier and they might get approved. Then, what would China do? If China tries to move into an area where they don't belong, they will be tormented. I really think China hasn't really thought this decision through, because there are no actual benefits for them, even if they are accepted.
Does that mean China should stick to RCEP?
Yeah, I think it's better for China to build a stronger influence within RCEP, and that's their usual strategy. Maybe they made a mistake this time. They are impatient and South Korea is even more impatient.
How is South Korea doing economically?
Honestly, they are not doing very well, because they are sticking with China. Well, they might have a breakthrough and grow, but they seem to be decoupling from other democratic countries. At some point, South Korea must decide which side they're on. Even at the Beijing Olympics, nobody paid much attention to them, because they are two-faced.
Now we're finally catching the vibes here in Japan.
Well, yeah, Mr. Kishida is not very organized. It's supposed to be easy, right? Even following traditional diplomacy, it's normal to send someone of the same rank as the person who went to the Tokyo Olympics. They did not have to talk about a boycott, and yet somehow things are not working out well.
Mr. Kishida should have said something earlier.
Maybe, Mr. Kishida is just the type of person who is never perfectly clear.
He's kinda pro-China.
To put it frankly, he does like China. Mr. Kishida is still the chairman of the Hiroshima Prefecture Japan-China Amity Association. There's no doubt.
Did they persist?
I'm not sure, because this is all ridiculous from the USA standpoint. The US knew that Abe and Suga were completely on their side, but Mr. Kishida doesn't seem like he is. That's why they couldn't hold a summit meeting. Usually the two leaders would have met after the election in November, but they didn't, right? If they cannot see each other before the end of 2021, a meeting will probably happen by January 17, 2022. If that doesn't happen, then they won't be able to see each other for a long time.
Is America telling Mr. Kishida not to come?
It's just diplomacy, so we cannot tell. However, normally once they are sure the LDP will win the election, they will set a date. Usually that would be in November. Even if that doesn't happen, they can have a conference in December. If it is decided not to meet in 2021, then there's not many days left. It's difficult to schedule a meeting on January 17th. If they can't figure it out by then, the next opportunity will be in April or May, because the Japanese hold budget discussions until March. This is highly unusual, and there's a possibility for the meeting to transpire. The US is trying to see if everything is okay. One political critic was talking about a political boycott of the summit conference, but this is maybe some kind of a trick. Apparently, this critic is close to Mr. Kishida. The explanation seems incoherent. I'm looking forward to your questions. If you like it, please subscribe to our channel.